profesional de Vaughan, te invitamos a una prueba de nivel gratuita para que lo tengas mucho más claro y sin ningún tipo de compromiso. Infórmate sobre cómo hacerla en el 91-133-5833.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is Western Civilization, from Mesopotamia to Silicon Valley. On tonight's program, I am also broadcasting live on our web page, so you can tune in and you can watch me in addition to listening to me. Now, on yesterday's program, I was talking about Recaredo, the Visigothic king, and his conversion of Spain to Catholicism. Of course, there were many intereses creados at that time. There were many vested interests in Arianism and in the different holy places, places of peregrinaje, places of pilgrimage, and a lot of tax, revenue, income, all of the kind of things that generates. And so the conversion was not without its critics. And unfortunately, Recaredo was not lucky in love. No, he had been promised to two very prominent women, queens in their own right, from noble families, as the custom was at that time, Frankish or from Burgundy or from outside. You would get this kind of international interchange among the Germanic tribes, and that was considered absolutely normal. That was what people did at the time. Well, it didn't work. It didn't work, and he ended up with a common woman. He ended up with a woman not from a noble family, no, and her name was Bado, which, at least in English, doesn't sound good. Her name was Bado. Now, evidently, it was a good marriage. They were in love. They had a son together. And after Recaredo died, this son took over. He was the king. However, as I say, you can't just convert an entire country to another religion or another branch of the same religion and not expect a reaction. And there was. The reaction was almost immediate. If you remember, on my last program, I was talking about the contention, the debate between Masona, who was the Catholic bishop of Merida, and Suna, who was the Arian bishop of Merida, appointed by Leovigildo himself, and how the two of them had to debate in front of Leovigildo. And although, according to the Chronicle, the argument offered by Masona was much more convincing, maybe precisely because of that. In any case, he was desterrado, he was banished. And he did come back. Leovigildo died. Recaredo took over. Recaredo converted the entire country to Catholicism and called the Third Council in Toledo. And the Third Council made sure that the royal power and the ecclesiastical power, the power of church and state, were united. They were all working on the same page. This gave a certain legitimacy to both, and it marked the end of hostilities. And so now, the Hispano-Romans, especially the noble families, the senatorial families, the families whose roots went all the way back to the beginning of the Romanization, they were able to marry into the Visigothic families and vice versa. But of course, all of this depended on the continuation. If there's going to be a Recaredismo after Recaredo himself, and with a common wife, I'm sorry, that just isn't going to happen. So yes, almost immediately, as I say, Suna reacted with a series of Gothic nobles, one of them called Sega, another of them called Vagrila, and they were trying to kill Masona before he could cause any more damage. So there was there was a plot. There was a plot to kill Masona. Now, one of the plotters, one of the conspirators, was named Biterico, and Witteric in English. Remember this name, Witteric. Now, all of this was discovered. There was a local Hispano-Roman commander, a man named Claudius, who found out about the plot. And, well, Sega, they cut off his hands, they confiscated his property, and they banished him to Galicia. Now, Vagrila tried to find refuge in a church there, but while he did, the king ordered the confiscation of his properties, that he was going to have to give all his properties to that church, although Bishop Masona pardoned him and gave everything back to him. Who they didn't punish, evidently, was Witteric. He didn't learn the lesson. Now, again, Recaredo sent Claudius to suppress this rebellion in Mérida, but they couldn't entirely. And is there going to be a continuation of Recaredo's policies? Everybody wanted to know this. His son, Liuba, was only a teenager when Recaredo died. And the only person he had by his side was his mother. But of course, his mother was a commoner. His mother didn't have this power. There was no matrilineal line of power. There was no real connection to the Visigothic aristocracy. And so the one conspirator who escaped, Biterico, well, he attacked Liuba, cut off his hand first, and then simply killed him, and took over. He became king, and he did everything he could to try to re-Aryanize Spain, to give the rights back to the Aryans for all the sacred places, and of course all of the income, la renta, that this generates. Now, poor Liuba didn't last very long, but then his replacement didn't last long either. First of all, he had an implacable enemy in the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire, although Spain had transformed itself, Spain had become Catholic during the reign of Recaredo. The Byzantines still didn't leave. It wasn't enough for them. And now they were angry, and they begin to attack, and they begin to retake some of the land that they had lost previously. They had lost under Leovigildo. Now, a faction of Catholic nobles were able to assassinate Viterico. We think. Some people say it was his own people. Some people say it was the people next to him who believed that he had become yesterday's man, and they didn't want to be implicated. So they were all washing their hands of this project. In other words, in order not to be punished themselves, they were going to turn against one of their own. In any cases, the kingship passed to a man named Gundamar, the Duke of Narbonne, from the north, from Septimania. Remember that at that time, the Visigoth command, let's call it the limit of the territory, where you had constant battles, where most of the army had to be stationed. That was up in, well, what is today France, right? Carcassonne, Narbonne, this area, right on the border with Frankish territory, right on the border with Burgundian territory, not very far from Italy itself. This area was perhaps the most important part of the Visigothic kingdom at that point because of the army, because of the military presence there. And so bad things for Toledo always happen in the north, always happen in Septimania. Yes, Gundamar came from Septimania and got rid of Viterico. He became the king. After that, well, Viterico was only king for about 2 years. After that, you had other Visigothic kings, Sisebuto, for example, who unfortunately began to imitate some of the worst practices that were happening at the time in the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire the Byzantine Empire, I'm going to be speaking about this in, I think on Thursday. In any case, the Byzantine Empire was in bad trouble. After the death of Justinian, things just went downhill. And they were having problems with it. At that time, the Sassanid Empire, the Persian Empire, we can call it that, the inheritors of the Persian Empire, the Sassanids, they're in Mesopotamia. They were getting strong. One of their greatest kings, Khosroes II, was expanding his territory at the expense of the Byzantines. And things looked very, very bad. What did they do? One of the things that the Byzantine emperor decided to do was to persecute the Jews. And things got so bad for the Jewish minorities, Jewish communities in the Middle East, that they abandoned the Byzantine Empire. They had been loyal subjects, they had been helpers of the Byzantine Empire until that point, but even the enemy at this point seemed preferable Khosroes from the Sassanids seemed preferable to the kind of treatment they were receiving from the Byzantine Empire. Well, for some reason, this persecution, this mania, had reached Spain, and Sisebuto was going to imitate it. This included forced conversions. This included all sorts of discrimination, and it's going to end badly. The situation will go from bad to worse for the Jews in Spain from this point on. Remember that many of them living in Toledo, the capital. So you can imagine. They say that by the time Islam arrived in Spain, the Jews were so sick and tired of the treatment that they had received from the Visigoths that they welcomed the invader. Well, something similar had happened in the Byzantine Empire, and nobody had learned the lesson. Nobody had been paying attention to this. In any case, yes, the church and the state, the Catholic Church and the kingship, they were now back together, and we can see this in Visigothic art. In the 19th century, in a place just southeast of Toledo, a small village, someone was working on his farm and found a sort of cement container there, and in that container there were treasures. There were the votive crowns of Swintilla and Retespinto, and there were all sorts of incredible jewelry, right? Joyería, done by some of the very greatest goldsmiths or febreros, plateros, silversmiths of that time. People who were familiar with what they were doing in Constantinople, people who were familiar with the kinds of things they were also doing in the Sassanid Empire. So truly an international thing. And this, of course, in Guadalajara, just outside Toledo. If you want to see those items today, you can see them in Madrid in the National Archaeological Museum. Now, the fact is that there are, other places that were not so lucky. Remember that the heartland of the Visigoths was actually further north. Toledo was the capital, and we have been talking about all the time and energy that their armies had to spend in Andalusia on the borderland with the enemy, with the Byzantine enemy, fighting constantly. And, of course, up north in the Cordillera Cantábrica, fighting. But the actual Visigothic heartland, the Campus Gotorum, or what today we call Tierra de Campos, that was where the Visigoths really felt at home. And for example, there's a place in a place called Fresno de Cantespino in Segovia, and they had all kinds of necropolises or necropoli. In any case, cemeteries where the Goths were buried, and unfortunately, this happened on several occasions. You got people during the 1940s. The Germans wanted to find some kind of connection between the Visigoths and the Germanic race, the secrets of the Germanic race. Remember that they were trying to give some kind of, supernatural justification for their racial theories, and they were looking all over the place. They were sending people to Finland, to Sweden, to believe it or not, to Dacia, right, in what is today Romania, to find some kind of origin. You know what they thought? The Guanches. They were going to go to the Canary Islands if the Nazis had continued. They were going to investigate in the Canary Islands because somebody said that the Guanches were blonde and blue-eyed and potentially Aryan. So that, in any case, Himmler himself was in Spain looking for the Holy Grail. I don't know if you remember the Indiana Jones movie, right? Spielberg's Indiana Jones. That was actually true. There was a department called the Ahnenerbe. Ahnen is like ancestor, and Erbe, yes, the heritage, the ancestral heritage department. And they were investigating all over. And they went to this place, for example, in Segovia, Fresno de Cantespino, and they took everything. They took everything to Germany, and it's never come back. All kinds of things, yes, removed, eliminated, and never brought back. At the time, during the time when there were many people in the Falange who were working very close, Nazis, who wanted to cooperate fully with Germany and wanted to celebrate the German heritage in Spain. And this meant the Visigoths. And so, unfortunately, this is what we owe the Visigoth Museum in Toledo, which is another place that you can go to see the material remains and some of the art of the Visigoths. Excuse me. The fact is that this museum is relatively small, and again, the sad thing is that it wouldn't even exist without this impulse, this Germano-Hispano fraternization in the 1940s. That was the impulse behind the creation of the museum. It's a wonderful museum. It's small, but very, very nice. And in a church, the church, by the way, has una cenefa, a frieze along the top. It has with obviously Christian images, but written in Arabic. And this is an amazing thing. Christian images, but with all of the letters in Arabic. That's something, at least to me, absolutely fascinating. So, as I say, like Fresno de Cantespino, there are many, many places up north where you can go. If you've ever been to San Juan de Baños, which is not very far from Valladolid, you can see a Visigothic church. The restoration, unfortunately, leaves something to be desired. The people who restored it had a preconceived idea of how it should look. And so they didn't really follow what archaeology was telling them to do. They followed what the aesthetics of the place told them it should be like. But of course, this is a place not far from Valladolid, as I say. There's a Trappist monastery nearby, but it's well worth a visit. Now, these baños that they're talking about, that is a place like a spa, un balneario, like a spa where the Visigothic kings went. There's a palace there, Gertikos. They talk about it again and again. There's a palace. We don't know where it is. And we don't know where those baths were, but obviously next to San Juan de Baños. And you can, there we have an incident where a king went to receive the water, but he died. All right, I'll be talking about that after the break.
Oye, Carolina, para despedirme en el correo, ¿cómo es un saludo? ¿Cómo se dice un saludo en inglés?
A ver, no es un correo muy informal. Pon regards y ya está.
¿Cómo? ¿Regards? Ay, madre, me tengo que poner las pilas con el inglés, ¿eh?
Mira, de verdad, llevas desde que te conozco diciendo que tienes que aprender inglés. Y a estas alturas no deberías perder más trenes. Igual, para cuando pase el próximo, ya es demasiado tarde.
En el mundo de los negocios, el éxito no depende de la suerte. La clave es saber ver las oportunidades y aprovecharlas. Así que no dejes pasar esta oportunidad porque te lo vamos a poner muy fácil. Uno de los más prestigiosos máster en inglés profesional con profesores especializados de Business English a un precio único. Llámanos al 91-133-5833 o entra en grupobaugan.com.
Whether it's getting in shape or finally learning English, finally getting serious about your English, it seems that people are always looking for excuses to start next week, to start next month, to start next year, to ponerse las pilas, as they say, to put the batteries in, but to really make the decision and make a jump with your English or with your fitness or with your guitar playing skills or whatever it may be. But one of the biggest excuses is, I'm too busy. I work too much. And that's an excuse that as English teachers, we hear a lot. I'll get serious with my English later, but I'm busy. I have too much work. I'm too busy. Well, we have a special course in Vaughan for people who work full-time with a busy career, with busy lives, and it's the EMIP, the Executive Master in Inglés Profesional. The EMIP course, which is an evening course. Yes, it's intense, but it is designed for people who are busy, who are working through the day. So if you want to make a jump with your English, if you're ready to take your English to the next step, I would encourage you to inquire about the EMIP, the Executive Master in Inglés Profesional de Vaughan, of course, and you can find out more by calling one of our representatives at 91-133-5833. That's 91-133-5833. So give us a call, 91-133-5833, or you can find more information through our offices, our delegaciones, at grupovan.com. And that's the EMIP, the Executive Master in Inglés Profesional, a course that is tailored. It is designed for busy people like you. If this describes you, if you're a busy person working all day and you want to work on your English in the evening, then this is the course for you, the EMIP. Give us a call, 91-133-5833.
Está en Roma.
It's in Rome.
Está en esa silla.
It's on that chair.
Está en el sillón.
It's in the armchair.
Está en el este.
It's in the east.
Está en este mapa.
It's on this map.
Está en el cuadro.
It's in the picture.
Está en aquella mesa.
It's on that table.
Está en esta calle.
It's on this street.
Tras el éxito de su primera edición, Richard Vaughan y Javier Fernández Aguado ofrecen de nuevo su seminario Emprender y Liderar, las claves del éxito. Adquiere tu entrada en grupobaugan.com/seminario.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Western Civilization, from Mesopotamia to Silicon Valley. On the first part of the program, I was speaking about, the things that happened in Spain after Recaredo, after the Visigothic king, converted Spain into a Catholic kingdom. The Visigothic kingdom became Catholic. Well, that was unstable, at least at first. And it took some time for the resistance to be superado, to be overcome. Then I was talking about different places in Spain where you can see, where you can visit the Visigothic heritage. By the way, I mentioned that if you tune into the website, you can see me. You can see me live. And there are ways, things you can write, things to communicate with me. One of the things that I have heard is whatever happened. On yesterday's program, I was talking about this extensively. Whatever happened to the tunic of Santa Eulalia? Because that played a big role in the contention, in the dispute, in the debate between King Leovigildo and the Bishop of Mérida, Masona. And, well, Masona said that he had destroyed the tunic, which of course was venerated by all of the Visigoths. He had destroyed the tunic, he had burnt it, and he had consumed the ashes, mixed the ashes with water, and drunk the ashes. That's what he told him. When in fact, the man was wearing the tunic, this miraculous tunic of Santa Eulalia. Well, somebody wrote on the website and asked, whatever happened to the tunic? Whatever happened to Santa Eulalia? Who was Santa Eulalia? The fact is that she was a very, very young girl. Early on in Christianity, at the end of the 3rd century, and that still as a very, very young girl, after Diocletian had published the edicts of persecution, remember that many of the martyrs in Spain were victims of Diocletian's edicts. And the fact is that if they had only waited, right? Because 10 years later or 15 years later, you are going to have the Edict of Toleration. So no more martyrs. But in this very short period, yes, many of the martyrs of Spain. Eulalia in Mérida was asked to join in a sacrifice. At this time, the Roman Empire was not doing very well. Diocletian was holding it together. He gave the Roman Empire a new impetus. And part of this impetus was in his persecution of Christians. But a new administration, new taxation laws, all sorts of things, revitalizing the empire. And part of this was mandatory sacrifices. Because if you don't participate in these sacrifices and the gods are offended, then the kind of things happen that towns want to avoid. And so Eulalia refused to participate. Now, they tormented her, and finally they put her in an oven, although her body was not consumed by the flames. And they say that the figure of a white dove, right? Paloma. A white dove flew up into the sky. And that this happened in the year 304. And that although it was not the right season, there was snowfall. So they associate snow with Santa Eulalia, the dove, the snow, and this veneration, extreme veneration in the case of the Visigoths. And of course, the Asturians, thinking of themselves as the followers, of the successors of the Visigoths, thinking of Oviedo as the new Toledo, they wanted to bring as many of these relics as possible to Asturias. And evidently this is precisely what they did with Santa Eulalia. First in different places, and then finally in Oviedo. So that that's what happened to her. As far as her tunic is concerned, I haven't been able to find out what happened. You remember that Mesona was exiled. He came back when Santa Eulalia appeared to Leovigildo in a dream. And so Leovigildo rescinded his banishment, el destierro, and brought Mesona back. But we don't know, as far as I know, we don't know about the tunic. Now, speaking of places, sacred places, you've got an interesting place not far from Valladolid, not far from what had been the Visigothic heartland. I talked about this palace. We don't know where it is. The palace Gertigos, with its balneario, with its spa, and very near where that must have been, because we don't know where it is. Very near there is a town, a village called Bamba, with a W. As far as I know, it is the only place in all of Spain that contains the letter W in its name, and it begins with the letter W. Now, there is where the legend of Bamba begins. We'll be talking about him in just a minute. But yes, it was very central in the Reconquista. And this area, it's also famous for its ossuario, the bones. You've got lots and lots of bones. Generation after generation of monks living there donated their bones to an ossuary, a place where you store bones. It's supposed to be the largest in Spain. In any case, there are the bones of something like 3,000 religious people in Bamba, otherwise a small town, but I imagine it's well worth visiting. Now, what happened in Bamba that they found? Oh, by the way, I've been trying to figure out why you have a pastry called Bamba. Why that pastry was named Bamba, and I have not been able to discover the origin of the name for that pastry. Whether the man who invented it was named Bamba, or whether there's some kind of symbolism in this pastry. But yes, and I know that in Catalonia it's not called a Bamba, something else, brioche, something. In any case, the Bamba was there, at least according to the legend, not far from Gertikos. And the king, Recisvinto, knew that his end was near. In desperation, looking for health, he went there to Gertikos, where he was comfortable, where he was at home. As I say, in the heartland, taking the waters, and unfortunately, death found him. Now, remember that at that time, at all times during the Visigothic times, you didn't have the Roman law, father to son, father to son. There were ways to get around it. I mean, for example, Leovigildo, he named his two children as co-kings, but that was because they were old enough. I mean, you couldn't just make it dynastic because there were other families, and that all had to be decided by committee. Now, the big innovation of Recaredo was to put the church on the committee. So the church was like un balsa de aceite, right? It was like oil on troubled waters, trying to find solutions for this perennial problem of succession with the Visigoths. Now, according to the legend, Recisvinto is dead. And the committee is assembled. Obviously, the committee knew he was going to die. And they were already there, ready to pick a successor as quickly as possible. The fact is that they decided to, well, this is a legend. Obviously, Bamba was already there. Obviously, he was on the committee. Obviously, he was favored, and he won by consensus. They all chose him. Well, the story goes that Saint Leo told the electors to look for a man named Bamba, whose property was somewhere to the west, and that a miracle would guide them there. That was the idea. Now, they were walking through the land, looking for whoever this was, and finally they found a Visigoth in his field with his plow, arado, to arar, to plow. The old spelling P-L-O-U-G-H, the new spelling P-L-O-W, to plow. The object is a plow. You plow with a plow. So here he was plowing his field. This is according to one version of the legend. There's another version of the legend in which he is un pastor, where he is a shepherd, and he is herding his sheep. So, either one, whether he's a farmer or whether he is a shepherd, but there they find him. The fact is that, you know, if you have him plowing there, then this corresponds really, really well with the legend of Cincinnatus, which everybody is familiar with. Cincinnatus, his name meant curly hair. That's what Cincinnatus means, right? Ricitos. His name was Ricitos, curly hair. And Cincinnatus, he was a patrician in ancient Rome, and actually they're in the transition between Rome as a monarchy and Rome as a republic. When Rome became a republic, there were all kinds of problems with the patricians and the plebeians. And finally, the plebeians went on strike. They all went to, I think it was the Aventine Hill, and they decided to strike. They decided to leave the patricians with nobody to work for them. And so finally the patricians invited the plebeians back, and they gave them the institution of the tribunes, who were going to look after the interests of the plebeians. Well, the son of Cincinnatus was anti-plebeian. And he thought he did everything he could to get them away from the forum, and he used groups of men to attack plebeian assemblies and go especially for the tribunes. And one of the tribunes died, and so there was this horrible scandal, this incident, and Cincinnatus's son ran away. He ran away to the Etruscans. And Cincinnatus himself had to pay an enormous multa, right, a fine. And he was reduced. He went back, washed his hands of politics, washed his hands of Rome, and went back to working on the land. And this, of course, this is in Livy's history, Livy's history of Rome. The idea that the citizen soldier, the citizen, the farmer senator, that's always going to be preferable. That's real Roman virtue. That's genuine Roman virtue. Living on your land. In any case, I forget who they were, the Aetians, something like that. They're attacking, these are hill people in the Apennines, and they come down, and they begin to attack, and Rome is in danger. So they decide that the only person who can lead Rome at this time is Cincinnatus. And they go to him, and they find him plowing. That's why this is so important, because Cincinnatus is plowing. And they tell him they need him. And he says, I prefer to plow. And they say, no, Rome needs you. It is your duty. And they give him dictatorial powers. Dictator could do anything for a limited period of time. Dictator could do anything he wanted, order anything he wanted. And the idea was, during times of real crisis, you need a dictator to save Rome. And that's exactly what he did. And when he was no longer needed, he left Rome for good, once and for all, and went back to plow his field again. And this is why everybody loves Cincinnatus. And this is why, for example, in the United States, in the American Revolution, the War of Independence, all of that, the founding fathers of the United States loved this idea of Cincinnatus, who gives up war, gives up his power, and goes back to plowing his field. Okay, well, that's the attraction, and that is obviously what we're seeing here with Bamba, right? This is an echo in the legend of Bamba, because they come and they see Bamba plowing in his field, and they say, they say, we need you. They beg, right? They suplican. They beg. They implore. They Bamba says, I am not going to accept the crown. I will not accept the crown until this dry stick in my hand, like un bastón, a walking stick, until it turns green, and all of a sudden, miraculously, the stick takes root in the ground and becomes green and begins fresh leaves coming out. And, a miracle. So he is convinced that he has a divine mandate to become king. There's another version of this story that Cincinnatus refuses until they threaten him and they say, if you are so obstinate, if you are so stubborn, cabezota, then you will lose your head. We will execute you here on the spot, ipso facto, right? In el acto, on the spot, if you continue to refuse. And Bamba decides that he would rather be king than corpse, than cadaver. And so he allows himself to be escorted back to the council and more like a captive than a monarch. He arrives in Toledo where he is anointed, where he is untado, no, de aceite, where he is anointed, because this is what you do to become king, where he is anointed and where he is crowned the king of Spain. Now, almost immediately, he had problems. You remember on the first part of the program, I was talking about Septimania. I was talking about that area in the Visigothic kingdom in what is now part of France, actually northern Catalonia. This area going all the way up to Narbonne, Carcassonne, all of Roussillon, all of this area belonged to the Visigoths, and because it was the border, it was heavily reinforced with troops. A lot of the army was there. The fact is that it was always going to be the source of problems, and there was a commander there, a man named Paul, or Paulus, or Paul, Pablo, who decided that he would be a better monarch. Now, you've got to be suspicious of this name because the name is clearly Hispano-Roman. It is not Visigothic. And the law was that only a Visigoth could be king, right? They'd gone a very long way to equalize the rights of Visigoths and the rights of the Hispano-Romans. But on this one subject, the law still stood. They were adamant. Only a Visigoth could be king. In any case, Paul, young and ambitious, believed that it was going to be child's play. It was going to be an easy thing to take the crown away from this old man. But it was a mistake. Bamba commanded his own army, took Paul prisoner, and Bamba said that in order to eliminate this man from the possibility of being king, that they should cut off his hair. Now, unfortunately, this is going to come back to him later. Okay, they cut off the hair of this rebel. And of course, in Visigothic times, the idea that your hair is cut off, if you have no hair, you have no power. If you have no hair, you can never be king. On an earlier program, I was talking about the Franks up north, the Frankish kingdom. And with these people, if you are in line to be king, you let your hair grow from the moment you're born. You never, ever cut your hair. And if you think that life is becoming too dangerous, because you know that if you want the crown, you're going to have to fight for it, well, at that point, you do cut your hair. And if you cut your hair, you're letting the entire world know that you don't want to be king, that you renounce the kingship. The fact is that, well, Bamba was going to suffer for this. He was going to suffer the same fate, but I've run out of time. I'm going to have to talk about this on tomorrow's program.
Llámanos para que uno de nuestros asesores expertos te informe de muchas otras opciones. 911335833.
Hey Alberto, how much do you weigh?